Hi, Becky and Alex. Thank you so much for coming on to the show.
Hi, Andy. Hi. Thanks very
Hello.
much for having us.
So it's a real pleasure to have you guys on here today, and I'm really excited to talk to you about your HMO business and what you've achieved, how you are doing it, and I'm particularly excited because I know you guys have a real fondness for student accommodation, just like me. So, guys, could you start by telling us a little bit about what your HMO business currently looks like?
Essentially, we are focused on student HMOs in Swansea. Our business is called Alex and Properties, and it is run by myself and Alex. So we manage the vast majority of the day-to-day running of the business ourselves. So from sourcing to financing to refurbing, and recently we've also been even doing some of the lettings ourselves as well. So our general strategy is to buy the rundown properties, convert them, and refurb them into the high-spec HMOs. And generally, traditionally, Alex did a lot of the hands-on work himself, but I guess more recently, he's been stepping away from that to more of the oversight and coordinating the build teams. And then from my own perspective, I normally focus on the sourcing and the planning of the interiors. And then I guess the last year we've been really focusing on the social media, the website, and creating our brand so that we can build awareness of ourselves online. So,
And something really interesting about you guys, and certainly when I look on social media, is that the kids seem to always be on site with you as well. So you've obviously got your hands full with a really young family as well, and you're a beautiful family. And you sent us some photos, but you've got a really young family, two young kids, haven't you, as well?
Yes, we have. Yeah. So yeah, they're quite a handful, but yeah, no, it's nice to get them in their high vis jackets and get them down on site and seeing what's going on. And yeah, they must have been on hundreds of property viewings already. So hopefully they're only 1 and 3, but hopefully they're picking up little tips. So yeah,
young apprentices, I guess. Yeah.
yeah.
And are you guys full time in the business now? Is Alex Alan like a full time thing for you both, or are you still doing things on the side?
For me, it is. Yeah, I'm still I'm doing it full time basically. But Becky, she's got a different job, just her job that she had before. She's still doing that, which is down to part time now.
Yeah.
So just 3 days a week doing that. But
And the last year I've been on maternity leave, which is why I've been able to really focus on like the social media and the website. But yeah, now I'm just returned to work part time, so it is a bit of a juggle
yeah,
at the minute.
And you're quite a handy guy, aren't you, Alex? You've got the trades and things like that behind you as well.
yeah. So I've sort of always sort of been interested in that side of things. I had a gap year before uni, and I worked on sites and sort of worked with different people, learning different things. And yeah, I decided sort of I think halfway through uni really that I didn't want to go down the graduate sort of job route, and that property was something I wanted to go into. So I did a lot of research while I was in uni and things like that. And then when I came out of uni, I decided I wanted to go into property, but I wanted to have some hands-on experience and things first before I just dived in. So I trained as an electrician. And I think sort of the general plan was to sort of maybe do the electrics as like the full-time job and then sort of do property on the side when I could and sort of build a portfolio that way. And then one day it would take over, but it hasn't really worked out like that. And since we bought the first one, it's sort of just rolled on and we've just kept going and just buying and refurbing. So we've just kind of gone into it that way, basically. Yeah.
Amazing. And I'm really excited to talk about your case study today as well, because it's a great case study and it looks absolutely fantastic. So, who's got the design eye? Is that a bit more you, Becky, or do you split this as well?
Oh, no,
Yeah.
it's all here, that one. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't get much from you when I'm trying to plan all the different interiors and everything. You're just sort of, yeah, it
Yeah.
looks great, it looks great. So, no, I really enjoy doing all of the planning and the sourcing of everything. So, no, I think we've gone a bit more out there with this latest project. Before, I guess we were a bit more, slightly more neutral, but this one I really wanted it to be a bit more wow.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it really is very, very wow. It's fantastic.
Yeah.
So we talked just before we were kind of recording, we were getting prepared. We talked a little bit about how you guys got started, and one of the interesting things that you mentioned was that actually you didn't go on any courses or anything like that. It was just something you kind of did. And student accommodation as well is quite a specialist area of HMOs, particularly. All of our listeners will know that student HMOs are definitely my favourite. I've got a real soft spot for student HMOs for a number of reasons. But why was it that you guys decided to start investing in student HMOs?
I think, well, both of us having recently been to uni sort of thing, we both lived in shared houses and, with friends and stuff, and we loved that experience. And it was something that we thought we could replicate, basically, having, recently experienced it ourselves, and we were kind of living in the kind of bit more run down, the dark and dingy, damp sort of student houses sort of thing. So it was something we thought, we can replicate that, but we can also add our own touch, and we can make it a bit better sort of thing. We can put that higher spec on it, because it's just something that was just missing, and we sort of thought something that we could do. But also my dad he's got a small portfolio of HMOs as well up in Edinburgh. My brother went to uni to study medicine in Edinburgh, so my dad got his first house there, and he lived in that with friends, because obviously he was going to be there for a long time, so it made sense. And I've watched the benefits of it through him, basically. So it was something I saw sort of alongside me going and living in a HMO myself, and Becky living in an HMO. So it was sort of the natural way for us to go, really. It was, as I say, we didn't do a lot of the education and stuff before we started. So student HMOs was one of the only sort of strategies we knew about.
Well, the formal education. Obviously, we did a lot of the research ourselves, but it was a lot more self-motivated rather than sort of starting with the property courses.
Yeah.
So I think there's a lot of similarity in the way that we did that, actually. I didn't really get any formal learning or training at all before I kind of jumped in. And looking back, I'm still so glad I did that, but there was still so much that I wish I'd have known and wish I'd have done better. And to some extent, years later, I paid perhaps the price of some of that, maybe not using the right materials, or maybe not managing tenants in the right way or properties in the right way. But how have you guys been able to go, because you've got, I think, 7 properties already in your student portfolio, so this has happened really quite quickly for you guys, hasn't it? How have you managed to build that business as quickly as you have?
I think so. Our first property venture actually was more of a flip. We were looking for a house for ourselves, basically, but we wanted to get on the property ladder, but we knew we wanted to sort of maybe make some money on a property as well. So it was a flip, but we ended up living there for 4 years. But we made a good bit of money off it, basically. So we bought it at auction. We bought it cheap. It was boarded up. It was an ex-caretaker's bungalow. It needed everything doing to it. So that really gave us the first. We did it evenings and weekends, and we sort of fell in love with renovating property, basically, through that. So kind of what we didn't have in like a formal education, we had in experience. As I say, we made a bit of money off selling that. In the early days, we had a bit of help from close family, basically, in terms of getting us going. But then as we've grown, sort of the money is sort of generated, and we've pushed all the money that we've earned from property, we've just recycled back into the business. So Becky works, as I said, so we sort of live off her income, and then all the money we've earned in property we've just put aside, and we just kept building deposits with that and the refurb money through that. And obviously the more you get, the quicker you can generate that money. So.
And it's interesting because you guys said before we kicked off that actually you don't really rely on commercial mortgages or anything like that. You're not overly aggressive. You actually, I think what you said is you do the refurbs, you get your term product, and you just wait, and you rely on the, like you say, the cash flow to reinvest. Then also when you come up to refinancing, I guess at that point you consider taking some capital out and also recycling that into your next project. Is that how you guys are doing it?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, it's sort of a BRR model, but maybe not straight away. It's kind of over 5 years. We wait for the 5-year fix to finish, and then there's capital appreciation in the property anyway, plus the value that we've added through the refurb. So then we can draw out quite a lot, more money at that stage. But it's sort of, being able to fund ourselves for that 2 to 5 year period at the start, just and continue just buying 1 or 2 every year. And then when the sort of the fixed years finish, then that kicks in, and that just gives us another source of funding then to go again and do another few properties off that money. Yeah.
And a lot of our properties are the smaller side, so actually our biggest property is a 5-bed, so it doesn't really fit with the commercial mortgages anyway. So
yeah,
it just suits our strategy to.
You're only ever going to get the bricks and mortar sort of valuations on them anyway, so it's sort of, we're not, as you say, we're not overly aggressive with it. It's not like we don't look at deals. The deal doesn't, if it doesn't stack up, if we need to get all our money out straight away to be able to pay off investors and things like that, it doesn't really stack up for us. So it kind of has to stack up in its own right first and be able to support itself before we'll buy it and then we can, as I say, let it run for a few years, and then we can take money out of it when we need to again.
Yeah, I completely agree with that, and I talk about it quite a lot actually. But my strategy is very, very similar. I'm not overly aggressive. I don't try and refinance onto commercial products unless it definitely is a commercial type of property. And I think actually, yes, it's possibly a little bit slower, but actually it is a much more sustainable model. There's much less risk involved, and it does need that patience, that foresight to know that if you just do the basics really, really well, which it sounds like you guys obviously have, it will pay dividend over time. So it's great to hear people talk about that, because I think one of the issues in the industry at the minute is this rush to do it and do it incredibly aggressively and take on more and more risk. And in doing that, it means looking at perhaps leveraging on these commercial products that aren't always asset backed. If the bricks and mortar is X and the commercial value is Y, then there's a gap there and it needs to be considered. So it's great to hear you guys, approaching your portfolio in that way and still making it work really, really well. What do you think the future looks like for you guys? Are you building an empire here, or just a lifestyle business? I mean, have you thought that far ahead yet?
I think we want to get to the 10 properties in Swansea. That's sort of our short-term goal, I guess. But I think so as not to have all the eggs in one basket. Obviously, we want to look at different strategies as well. I mean, we mentioned we did that flip, if you can call it that. It's quite a delayed flip, but we did that one. We're also doing a self-build project that we're working on in the background as well. So I think definitely building the HMOs, and I think probably that will always be our core strategy, but we would like to have other strategies going on. We do really enjoy doing the flips. So I think definitely can see us doing some more of those in the future.
I think having that another strategy on the side, similar to what Jake and Lucy talked about in their podcast a couple of months ago, is great, and a great way to diversify a portfolio as well, and maybe build an equity pot at the same time as building a cash flow, which is what you guys are doing. So I'm sure a lot of our listeners are really interested to hear us talk a little bit more about student property, because actually, and even though student property by quite some way, forms the majority of the HMO market, it's not what most of us tend to think about when we hear and see it, particularly in the social community. So, and I love talking about this topic because there's lots of myth busting, and there definitely are some truths to it. But I would love to hear what you guys... Let's start with what has been good and what you think is great about the student model, and then we'll talk about maybe some more of the difficult stuff, which I know there definitely is. But what do you love about the student model? Why have you picked that, and why are you sticking with it?
I think for us, one of the main things we like is that we always rent to groups. So rather than if it's professionals, you sort of one in, one out all the time, you're kind of always on the lettings, you're always looking to fill rooms. But with students, they sign up in July and they move out in June, and then so they don't move into the property till September, and then for the following year they start looking in sort of October and November, and generally we rent all our houses before Christmas, so we kind of have like an 18-month period where we're full. So we love that sort of security, and it enables us to forecast a bit better. We know we've got that cash flow coming in. But the groups, I think, is another thing, because they're all friends. They come together, so you only have to, you have to rent the property once rather than rent individual rooms. And then it cuts down on the squabbles and things like that. And you don't get people that don't know each other using each other's butter and ringing you in the middle of the night and things like that. So we kind of avoid all of that sort of stuff. So I think that's one of the main reasons we like about it, yeah.
It is predictable with the academic year, but obviously you fully expect, or the students are going to keep coming, everyone, it's sort of a part of life, isn't it? People go to university,
Yeah.
well, a lot of people go to university, so you're expecting the demand to sort of keep going on. And particularly in Swansea, they've been investing millions in a whole new campus and everything. So from that point of view, it does provide us with that extra bit of security, I guess.
I think that predictability that you've talked about is definitely one of my most favourite things about the student model. I think it's such a powerful tool to be able to see, like you said, Alex, 18 months ahead. It doesn't matter what business you're in. If you've got a cash flow forecast that is accurate and predictable for 18 months, that's a great position for you to be able to plan and leverage against. And that is difficult to obtain in the professional market. The truth is the churn, and we talked about it actually with Dan Green on the show, but that churn is real. The rate at which professional tenants can move out and move in means that you can often have your work really cut out, but with students you can consolidate that effort, can't you? You can do it all at once in that lettings window. If you're getting let before Christmas, that's always the goal, isn't it? The more we get let by Christmas, the better Christmas is, I think, and that's it. You know for 18 months that you're all sorted, which is just brilliant. But let's talk about some of the the more difficult and challenging parts of managing students and student accommodation. What do you think, Becky? What have you found particularly difficult about student HMOs?
I think one of the things that can be difficult, obviously, is when you come to the end of the year and you go in and you do your inspections, and they are students, they are trying to have fun. There's a lot of parties normally with when it's not COVID. There's a lot of drinking, and it's their first time not living at home, so I guess they're not used to upkeep on a house and doing the cleaning and things. So sometimes you go in and we've done all the cleaning, and you go in and you're like, this is really not very clean, and there's marks on the walls, and yes, there are things like that, but I think it comes with the territory, and I don't think they're there to have a good time, but they don't do anything deliberately. But it's just sort of having that sort of budget in mind. At the end of the term, there probably is going to things that need fixing, and things that they say are accidental, which are probably not accidental at all. There's probably some alcohol involved, but I think that's one of the challenges, is just making sure that summer period for us is really about maintenance, making sure everything is put right. I think that's sort of one of the challenges.
Yeah, that's one of the challenges. Yeah, but I think it's why we do quite heavy refurb at the start, basically, is to kind of bulletproof them to students, make everything as robust as possible, and put things so that we know we can come back in and they're going to wreck that or they might break that, but we know we can come in and just fix it behind them. And as Becky said, you kind of have to expect that they're students, they're going to have a good time, and it's the first time that they've lived on their own, so you get that element of it. Yeah, for sure.
I completely agree. Students can be heavy-handed at the minute. I think what I always like to do is remind people that our professional tenants really are our student tenants, just maybe a year or two older, and have a job instead of have a place at university. They're fundamentally the same people, and the values and principles are generally the same, but they can be a little bit more heavy-handed when they're students. And we do need to bulletproof student properties to some extent. It means using the right materials, it means doing it properly, and doing it properly once, I think, the first time, and then hopefully not having to repeat it. And that was definitely one of the mistakes I made earlier on. Didn't use those robust materials, didn't put some things in place that actually, over the long term would have been more cost effective. But it definitely is real, and I think I share that feeling with you as well, Becky. When you go in at the end of the term or the end of the year, and you see what your amazing property just 12 months ago now looks like, and it's lost that gloss. It still looks great, but it's lost that premium feel. But that's just part and parcel of doing this, isn't it? It's the nature of it, and I think to some extent we have to toughen up to it. We're going to almost zip up and get on with it, because it's just part of the business model. I remember I used to. My parents have invested with me, a lot over the years as well, and Mum used to come and get quite involved in the end of the tenancy bits, the bits that she kind of likes. Doesn't like dealing with the management. That was I dealt with that, but she'd like to come in and check the properties and things like that. And it just got too much. Her disappointment walking into every one of them, no matter how good I actually thought they'd been, and actually compared to the other properties, how good the tenants actually had been, and how they'd handed the property back. It was never quite good enough, and found it actually easier to just remove her from that completely now, and just tell her that it just still looks amazing. But they do tire over time. I
think Alex does that sometimes. Sometimes you do the inspections, I'm like, oh, how does it look? And I'm like, it looks good. I'm like, show me the pictures. I think we've got to harden up to it, and it's a cost of running this business, I think, and I think that the best landlords that I know in the market are people who really understand that, and actually they prioritise doing those periodic improvements,
managing their tenants well to make sure that this sort of stuff is minimised and managed when it does happen. But there are definitely those landlords out there, and I know you guys will have seen them, but they ignore this and they wait for 10 years before they think about intervening, and the property just degrades and the value erodes and the tenant demographic, gets eroded as well, and all of a sudden it becomes a difficult property with difficult tenants. And unfortunately that's actually a big part of the market now. There aren't that many people like you and I and other people in our community doing what we're doing. We are still a very, very small fraction of what's happening in the market. Have you guys found that as well?
Definitely. I think that the landlords you just described there, they're the type that we buy off, because they haven't done anything for 10 or 20 years. They haven't kept up with the regs. The houses, as you said, is degraded so much that they're sitting there thinking, I've got to spend £40,000 on this now to bring it back up just so that it's in a rentable state, then it's up to regs. And they just say, I don't want to do it. I'm getting older. I want to get out of the game. So they're happy just to sell them cheap. They've had capital appreciation, so they're still getting a good profit from it. And I think, as you say, they're the type of houses that we generally are buying, and we can just we feel that we're happy just to go in and rip it back to the bare bones again and start again, because there isn't much there that we kind of want to keep.
But we've had
guys, how have you found the market in the last year with COVID? Because there was a lot of anxiety around the student market and how that might perform, and actually it's hit the headlines a number of times. We've had students going on rent strikes, perhaps not necessarily in Swansea, but certainly in a number of areas in the country. How have you found it, and how have you managed it?
I think one of the main effects that COVID had on us was particularly doing the refurb that we're going to talk about in the case study. That made things really difficult. Obviously, Alex does like to be involved in site, but it had been the plan that we were going to have a lot more trades and build teams in on that one. But as soon as lockdown happened, everything went quiet. People weren't working as much. Obviously, it was really difficult. So that became really difficult. Alex had to do a lot of the work himself. Obviously, nurseries were closed, so I was at home with the 2 small children. So that became really difficult. Getting materials, everything like that was hard. But I guess in terms of COVID for this year, sort of since September, since the students have all been back, it's just having to plan around it, I guess. I mean, I think quite early on, just before we were about to start renting all of the properties, we were in lockdown. But actually it sort of worked out quite well for us. It was the first year of doing the lettings ourselves, and we had so many people messaging us. We actually ended up with waiting lists. Obviously, we're waiting for lockdown to finish, so we had loads of waiting lists for people that wanted to see our properties. So we had all of that interest. But I think over the summer, because we were doing a lot of this online push, we have been getting a lot of virtual tours for our properties. We'd had a lot of professional photos. So we were able to just sort of rent a lot of the properties off virtual tours. So that was amazing. And then we use online tools so that we can send out all the contracts just online. We don't need to do anything face to face. So from that sort of running the business, I think that worked really well. In terms of the students being back in the university, back in our properties and everything, I think we've got some quite eager students, or they just really enjoy living together. I think one of the houses, two of the houses, I don't think actually went home over Christmas, or some of them didn't go home over Christmas, so they were still there. We had the house that was in 7 a.m. on the 1st of September. They were moving in, all of them. And again, in January, they were back. As soon as Christmas was over, they were back as well. So I think from that perspective, we have been quite lucky. We haven't, it hasn't been hit too hard, I guess. So we are very lucky in that manner.
I think we found it similar as well. I think there was a lot of noise. We definitely had a lot of requests from tenants asking for rent refunds and things like that, which had to be managed. And actually last March, we had a tidal wave of them. So that was much more difficult to manage at that point. But there was a lot more anxiety in the market then, a lot more unknown. And almost 12 months on now, people and our students seem to understand it more. And actually, I think the alternative of being stuck at home with mum and dad and their families isn't actually as attractive as living in their student house, even if they're not able to enjoy the university experience, which really, is a bit of a tragedy that they can't enjoy, but still it's better than the alternative. So we're finding that a lot of our tenants are actually in our houses, and they've been great. This year, this term, we've had maybe 1 or 2 requests for rent refunds, but I think that's people just pushing their luck a little bit. But actually, when we explain why we can't do that, they've been okay, and we haven't had any problems. And actually, we've been quiet. We've done exactly the same as you guys. We've managed to let properties with online viewings. We've had to be kind of less on the ground, which has been good in some ways. And we've had time to work on systems and processes and almost sharpen the blade a little bit, which when you're running a student portfolio, there are so many moving parts. I don't know what you guys think, but sometimes it's nice to just have a bit of breathing space where you can actually focus on the business as opposed to just all the details in the business. Did you find that you guys have, is that one of the reasons why you've decided to self-manage, or is that for another reason altogether?
No, I think so. Yeah, I think for me, because since we started, I've just rolled one refurb into the next, and I've always planned to buy us when the next refurb has ended, but COVID kind of stopped us being able to do that. Basically, the sale that we was going through with COVID, we put them on pause, and then it took a lot longer to go through. So it kind of gave me a few months off where, I was able to focus then a bit more on the paperwork and the office-based stuff and that part of the business. Because sometimes maybe I just get too engrossed in the refurbs and I don't give that side of the business enough attention, and then it's sort of always in the evenings and it's always around the kids and around Becky's work, so it's harder to do that. So as you say, we've sort of refined our processes and our systems a bit more during this period, and I think in fairness, has given us a bit of time to sit back and reflect rather than just being full steam ahead and just kind of just going with it, but not being able to plan and think about that side of the business.
And is your plan to continue managing all the HMOs now? Are you looking at becoming self-managing landlords?
I think so. As Becky said, we're quite comfortable with the strategy that we're on now, and it was sort of for no real reason. We just want to get to that 10 in Swansea, and then we might just sit back and look. And I think that we'll always continue growing in Swansea, but we might just look then at other options and other things just to diversify ourselves a bit. But at the moment, we're happy with the sort of the route we're on, and we're just definitely carrying on with that for the short term.
I think as it gets bigger, obviously we have to judge things as they come. Obviously, with more houses, there's more people to deal with. There's more check-ins, and different times of the year can become really busy. So I guess at some point as we grow, we'll have to consider about having other people help manage the properties for us. But at the minute, I think it's just sort of seeing how we go, and obviously trying to utilize our 24 hours a day the best we can. And we have started looking at outsourcing things, and we have actually recently outsourced bookkeeping, which I'm very happy about. I don't have to have so many conversations with Alex about where all the capital versus revenue expenses or things like that. So I guess it's just sort of assess it as it comes and see what works best.
Yeah, I think there's lots of pros to self-managing, but you are right. You can get to a point where there is so much to consider when you're self-managing that itself becomes the business, and it just happens to be that the underlying assets are yours that you own, but you're very much involved in managing all these tenants, managing all these properties. And I think you get to a point with student HMOs, if you're very hands-on, where you kind of have to almost sacrifice your good chunk of your summer holidays, because that 6-week period and all the preparation, getting the cleaners ready, getting the tenants prepared, getting all the deposits sorted, getting the cleans done, getting the inventories done, means that we're super busy. And Gemma goes mad at me, and she kind of forgets every single year that that's kind of my job. But yeah, that summer holiday can be a bit of a write-off, and my staff know that they've got to expect that we're going to be very busy then, and we don't take annual leave then as well. But I think with the right staff and the right systems, you can step further and further away and still self-manage, but it definitely does rely on having good systems, good staff members to do it. But I think, and from a profitability point of view, if you can do it and do it well, it's great, because property management is very expensive, isn't it? Paying tenant fine fees and paying management fees can be really expensive.
Yeah, and I think that's why we wanted to have a go at letting them ourselves this year, because it is a lot. I think it's like 2 weeks rent per person, And for all of the students, that does add up as quite a big cost per year. So we just wanted to have a go at letting them ourselves this year and just see how that went. And it worked really well, having like the online, the social media. We had so many inquiries coming through Instagram. So definitely, I think that worked quite well for us.
Let's talk about your case study, guys. This is an amazing case study. And for all our listeners, Becky and Alex's case study is going to be in the roadmap with all the pictures before and after, and a lot more context about the background and exactly how you made this happen. But can you tell us? Can you just give us an overview of the higher level numbers on this case study, guys?
Yes, I've got them in here in front of us, so we can remind ourselves. So the purchase price, we bought it for 160.
With the stamp duty and then the refurbishment costs. So it ended up being about 241,300 spend.
So we spent about 75 on the refurb. So it was a sizable refurb that we did. But well, we're now renting it for $550 per room. So it's sort of 33,000 a year. Sort of gross rent makes us so. And our running costs are about £1,000, just over £1,000 a month for our running costs. So
this is quite substantial numbers, and this is a 5-bed, isn't it, guys?
Yeah, 5-bed. Yeah.
And how did you find the deal? Was this something that was on the open market, or was it something that you kind of found off the market?
No, it was just on the open market, just through an estate agent. But we actually managed to get. I think we got the first viewing of the property, and as sort of one of our main strengths basically is we know our market very well, so we knew it was a good price. So we sort of just went in, had a look, and we just put an offer in there and then at the viewing basically, and it got accepted, and we just went from there. We knew it was going to be a high level of competition for it. There always is. They never last on the market for very long. So we just we saw it, we knew it was a good price, and we just took it basically.
And was this something that was in a prime location? Did you specifically pick one of the best locations that you could, or did you have to compromise on anything at all?
No, not really. It was a really good property. So because our focus is the Swansea students, they have a little hub in Swansea where majority of the students live, and it's really not that many different roads. It's quite a small area, so we are really familiar. As soon as we see things come up online, we know where they are. We know the locations really well. So this one is a really good location. It's just around the corner from shops. It's a short walk to the campus. There's the beach, there's pubs, restaurants, there's everything there. And it is a huge property as well. It's a 5-bed, but I think it's just under 20% larger than some of our other 5-beds, so it is a bit of a beast of a property.
Yeah.
So I think even just seeing it online, we could see the asking price, we knew where it was, we could see the pictures, so from there we had a really good idea that it was a good property.
And have you had to put en suites in to get and achieve rents like that, or is this just standard rooms with shared bathrooms?
No, we got 3 en suites, so 3 of the rooms are en suites, and then there's a separate bathroom and another separate WC. So, yeah, that's something that, again, we've done a bit more this time. Normally we try and get sort of 1 en suite in there. And again, from renting them this year, some of the feedback we're getting a lot from tenants is they want the extra bathrooms now. They want the social space and they want the extra bathroom. So, yeah, it was something we tried to get in a bit more, yeah. But the rooms that don't have en suites, they've all sort of got an individual design. They've all got sort of custom made furniture, like handmade desks and things like that, with real focus on design. So the rooms that don't have en suite, they've got built-in wardrobes, or they've got like a big desk area and things like that. So we put other sort of perks in the rooms that we couldn't get en suites in, if you know what I mean. So,
was putting en suites part of your consideration to future-proof the properties, or is this something that you feel like the market in Swansea needs right now? Because I think en suites and the topic around en suites is a really interesting one. In Sheffield, for example, actually most of our accommodation isn't en suited, and the gap between what we can get for non-en-suited rooms and en-suited rooms isn't that substantial. And where we've got really good quality accommodation, the market without the market is still very, very strong. So while I do think long-term in Sheffield and some of the markets that I invest in, en-suites will be a good idea, at the minute it's definitely not something that we need to be competitive and actually still be one of the top competitors. Is it the same in Swansea, or do you already feel like you need those en-suites there?
No, I think it's the same. Yeah, I don't think it's something that's needed. And often we don't actually price the en-suites any differently. We sort of just give a price per room. And sometimes I think the tenants work it out between themselves. You know, they'll pay £30 less, they'll pay £30 more. But we don't really put a focus on that. It's more the house as a whole and the social. I think the en-suites is kind of, if that person's got an en-suite, that's one less person using the main bathroom. So that's good for the other tenants. So no, it's not something we feel that we have to do. And I do get nervous about putting 5 en-suites in sort of, you know, these are all Victorian terraces. And sometimes I think you're just putting too much pressure on the system, on the water pressure, on all the waste. You have to get all the waste pipes out and dropping ceilings everywhere just to kind of get all these shoehorn all these en-suites in. So it's kind of more just putting them in there, and it just lets everybody have sort of a better experience in terms of how many people are sharing bathrooms and things. So
yeah, I think having the facilities in there, but it's also that being mindful of the refurb costs. If you are going to refurb again the house in 5 to 10 years, that's a lot of bathrooms to be replacing. So it's a balance between having enough facilities and
how much it costs.
Yeah, and the costs as well.
And I think in student houses particularly, there is a tendency for things like waste traps, just really fundamental things that aren't that difficult to manage but do crop up quite frequently, particularly when you've got a lot of en-suites, like the waste traps getting filled, like the grout getting discoloured. And no matter what we say to our students and how many times we ask them to make sure that they clean the grouts and clean the silicone, often we go in and find that they've got mould stained, and all of a sudden that amazing shower that we've made doesn't look amazing, so we have to take it off and do it again. But for me, that's just part and parcel of managing students, and it's just one of the things that we accept that does happen. And no matter how many times we ask people, we're probably just setting unmanageable expectations for them to get the Dettol out and clean it after every single shower. One thing I want to ask you guys about is the communal space downstairs in this project, because it really is an amazing space. It jumps off the page, and I can just imagine that anybody who went to see that property in person, or even on a virtual viewing, would have just had a huge wow factor. Is doing open plan spaces part of your core strategy, or did this property just happen to lend itself to it? Is it something that you try and repeat every time?
No, I think living spaces is a really big focus for us. We want the students to enjoy living in our houses, and with that you want them to have the really good social spaces. And this house, we did a really small extension on the side so that we could link the kitchen and the living room together, but so it's ended up with a really good sized living room, a huge kitchen, and then a big dining area as well. And I just think, the students that are in there now, they love it. They think it's really sociable. And I think it worked out well, particularly for this year with COVID as well, because they are stuck in the houses together, and they have this really nice social space. There's lots of space for them to be together, to relax together as well. But obviously when they can have their friends over, it'll be a really nice place to live as well. But even when we don't have, if the house doesn't necessarily lend itself to that, obviously we do have open plan houses, but some of the houses it just doesn't work. So we do focus on having covered outdoor areas as well. So there's a few of our houses now I think have those, but the students love those as well. I think in one of the houses it is actually open plan, but they have like a swivel TV on the wall so that they can all sit outside in this covered area, swivel the TV round, and I think they think that's amazing. And I think it's just being able to provide that space, whether it is utilising the outdoors as well. I think it just really makes it a good experience for the students.
I completely agree. I think it's so important to provide that a cohesive environment, something that encourages them to hang out and to chill. And actually, we like to. And one of the problems we found with the smaller HMOs is that when you've got maybe a small offshot kitchen and maybe some sofas, on around the sides, and almost everyone's forced to sit, in one place, and there isn't much space to do anything else with. We found that we tend to get more intra-house conflicts and issues, and I think it's probably people simply don't have enough space, and they're kind of living on top of each other, even though they're pals and they're good mates, and they've got the house together as a group. Whereas the slightly bigger houses, where we put different and more interesting furniture arrangements, sometimes we'll use a breakfast bar type of piece over in one area of the room, and an L shape somewhere, and then there's maybe some other seating somewhere else. We like to put these areas where people can just hang out and chill and move around and not have to sit in one place and look in the same direction every single time. And we find that really helps. And it might be that people just come and they pop laptops on something like that, and because sometimes they'll like to all watch YouTube video or something quickly on the laptop. And I think we forget that our student tenants do live quite differently to professional tenants, who will generally keep themselves more to themselves. Not always. I think it's still really important in professional houses to make sure we have that communal space. But students particularly really like to spend a lot more time in the communal areas than they do in their own bedrooms. And often when they're in the bedrooms, the other guys are in there as well. They'll watch films in the bedroom, they'll study together, they'll hang out in the bedrooms, they'll get ready together. Whereas professional living is slightly different. So I couldn't agree more with you, and having that space on offer and encouraging that communal living is so important. And particularly if you just want to make sure we don't have problems in the house and we keep our tenants happy. And yeah, this year has been so important for that, because they have been living on top of each other and they haven't been able to go out and do much. So we've definitely felt it, but we've also definitely realised just how important that is. I think we've always preached it, but this year we really have seen the benefit of it as well. And actually, I think when people started looking this year for their houses, or last year for the houses for next July, the patterns were really clear. People were asking for garden spaces. The ones with the bigger open plan spaces went much quicker. So I think some of those characteristics were obviously at the forefront of our students' minds, which makes a lot of sense. Guys, we've talked a little bit about why you invested in student properties and the good and the bad, and we've talked about this incredible case study which people can go and find out a bit more about now in the roadmap. But let's talk a little bit more about the business side of things, and that always interests me, because I think that is the most challenging thing of everything. Balancing forecasts and cash flows and finance and where we prioritize our time is always so challenging. And we know you've got a young family, so how have you managed this process between yourselves? Has it been difficult and stressful? Have you needed a lot of help from other people? And what advice would you give to anybody perhaps who's a few steps behind you, maybe getting the first or second HMO but wants to get up to 5, 6 and maybe towards 10 HMOs? Where would you advise that they start, and how would they go about doing this?
Yeah, I think at the start, I think we were it was a bit more chaotic. We were just sort of doing things as and when they sort of landed on our plate. And, we didn't have as many structures and things as we do now. But as the more you get, you kind of have to, because it's just a mountain of paperwork to get on top of otherwise. So yeah, we have definitely developed systems and templates for things and emails, and so that we can just copy and paste, names and the different prices of houses, and we can send an email out to people, because you get a lot of requests for the same house, so you've got to send it out 4 or 5 times to different groups before somebody takes it and things like that. So if you're constantly having to write that out from scratch like we used to do at the start, it's a lot of work. So now, yeah, we've definitely got systems and structures in place to sort of help us with that, which I think, yeah, the more houses you've got, the more need there is for that sort of thing.
But I think, knowing your area, doing that due diligence, doing the research, I think obviously we've done a lot of that at the start, but now it is a lot faster. We see the notifications coming through emails of the different properties that are coming online, and we can just generally look at them and like, that's not going to work, that does work, this is our price bracket, this is what we need to work. Yeah. And things become a lot faster as you become more experienced and as you've spent that time researching and just really knowing everything about your area. I think that's definitely a good place to start. Just make sure you do that research.
Definitely, and I think once you've done that, and you're really immersed in that market, and you develop those contacts and those networks, and people recognise you from viewings, and you get to know 1 or 2 landlords, and you know tradesmen who know other people, the opportunities start to kind of come out of the ground, don't they? They start to appear more frequently, and that helps you build that business a little bit quicker. And I think we should never underestimate just how valuable that immersion in our market is. And I think that's one of the tough things for people who invest remotely. They're investing in other areas because it's very difficult to spend that time on the ground with people Whereas if you're local, it is that little bit easier, I think, to do that and to develop those connections and networks. Did you guys know Swansea? Is that where you're from? Before you started investing?
No, not really. No, in fairness, probably know Cardiff a lot better. It was just by chance, actually, one of the estate agents that was showing me around student. Again, it was still student houses. That's where we were looking, but we were looking at Cardiff. But he said he was from Swansea. He knew Swansea a lot better, and he basically said, you're kind of getting the same rents in Swansea as you are in Cardiff, but you're probably going to pay £100,000 less for the house. So that at the start for us, obviously we had a budget, so we were thinking, okay, that makes more sense. So yeah, we started looking into it at that point really, and yeah, from there we haven't looked back. So it
is about an hour's journey for us to get to Swansea and back. So again, it's that being organised.
Yeah, I'm always doing a refurb, so I'm always there. So that's definitely helps the maintenance side of things, because if they've got a problem, I'm going to be in Swansea the next day and whatever, so I've got all my tools or everything are there, so I can pop round and do things. It's not like I have to make a special trip there just to go and change a light bulb or turn an isolation switch off. I'm sort of there, so that definitely helps. That sort of makes it easier for us, the fact that I'm always on the ground there. And that's why we do the big refurbs at the start, is so that the houses are robust and we don't have as many of those maintenance issues. So that does, again, that decreases the workload for us, if you know what I mean, because we're not having to fix things all the time.
Yeah, I can really imagine that is incredibly helpful. I think, I don't know what you guys think, but one of the really important things, and you mentioned it already, Becky, but just really thoroughly understanding and knowing where you're investing is so important, and I think so important in the student market. We get calls quite often from people who are looking at investing in the areas where we invest, and we have an investment service, but they don't know much about it, and often they'll have a property in mind. They've already seen something that they've identified as being good, and naturally I think people will see where the university campus is and then where some housing is and think that's got to be a good location. It's kind of 10 minutes walking distance, but actually it doesn't quite work like that in the student market, does it? There are areas that really do work and pockets of housing that our students love, but then there are areas where our students just wouldn't touch. They don't live there at all. It's a very different type of proposition, and even where we invest, it can be as acute as the other sides of the road or the next street around, where our students simply just wouldn't live for one reason or another. Maybe it's just too far, maybe it's just because the friends don't live there, maybe it's just because that neighbourhood isn't that great, and that's the same with every city. But do you guys find that is the same in Swansea as well?
Yeah, definitely. Even Swansea's got quite a lot of steep hills in Swansea, and even on some streets, it's if you're at the bottom of the hill, you're okay. If you're at the top of the hill, they don't want to carry their shopping up there, so they're not going to touch it. But yeah, location is something we really don't want to compromise on. So yeah, we know the streets that we like and that the students like, and we always stick for there. We could go, as you say, the other side of the street or 2 minutes away, and we could buy a much cheaper house, and the figures would look better on paper, but you don't know how that's going to impact on your business down the line. If the houses are harder to rent, if you have to drop your rates, if you get more void periods, that just all knocks your profitability further down the line. So we're Swansea, I mean, the whole of Wales is Article 4, so we know most of the time we just look for existing HMOs, so we kind of appreciate that we're going to spend a bit of a premium to buy the property, and in the area that we want, but we know in the long run it's going to pay off as just so it just makes things easier and makes renting the houses a lot easier.
Yeah, there are actually a little area that's really close by to where we invest, but I think there was like a campus or part of the other university that was there, but it's like recently relocated, so there's actually loads of HMOs there for sale. So I mean, from what I've been hearing, a lot of like investors that aren't local, they're looking at buying all of these because they are cheaper, but the students aren't there anymore. They've moved away. So yeah, it is just sort of knowing your area again, I guess.
And it's so easy to make that kind of leap and build that bridge to buying something like that with these assumptions, and actually it can be so wrong, because it really, no matter how good we can make something look, or like you said, Alex, how good it looks on paper, if our students don't want to live there, that's it. And there really aren't often many alternatives. Professional accommodation is sometimes an alternative, but that's not really how we ever want to approach student accommodation, is it? We really want to have, the location at the core of everything we do. And one thing that I've been talking to people about recently is the market has continued to move in the same direction for the last decade. It's become more expensive, more competitive. The yields have got compressed, and I only see that continuing. I think there's a long way to go yet. I think the big money, the institutional money, is yet to enter the private rental sector. We've seen them building the blocks and investing in the PBSA stuff, but I think, in fact, know that they're coming into the PRS as well, and they will become our biggest competitors. But they're happy to accept significantly lower yields than we are, which makes me think that actually the student HMO market, particularly in areas like Swansea and where we invest, where there are Article 4 directions, are going to become more and more competitive. Prices are going to continue to go up and yields are going to get squeezed. And I think for that reason that at the minute, having to think about investing for future values is something that the really savvy student investors are doing. They recognise that it probably does look overpriced today, but actually, with all things considered, in a couple of years it'll probably look like it was very good value for money. And I guess that's the art of investing, but really, really, really acutely understanding the student market and how it works and all of the factors involved in what makes a good student HMO and where we think that whole market is going is so important. So I think there's a long, long way to go yet, but I do think it's going to become increasingly difficult over the next 5 to 10 years as well. So anyone who's trying to get in now or investing maybe wants to think about that, and I certainly am. I'm finding that prices are still moving very, very quickly, and almost 6 months later I'm thinking actually that probably didn't look like a bad price. I should have just bought it. And actually, if I look back in the last 3 or 4 years, that's probably been the case for a lot of stuff. And in retrospect, I wish we had bought so much more than we did. But hey, I guess that's the beauty of retrospect, isn't it?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
Guys, thank you so much for coming on to the podcast. It's been an absolute pleasure to have you here and to talk about your story and share an incredible case study. What's next? What can we expect from you guys? Have you got projects in the pipeline at the minute?
Yeah, we just actually bought one 2 weeks ago. It completed. So yeah, that's a refurb that we've just started. So yeah, that's going to be us for the next 6 months there. Well, 4 months there probably. But then, as Becky mentioned earlier, we're just about to start a self-build as well. So yeah, it's slightly different to the student HMO, but yeah, that's going to be obviously for us and our family home and things with the young kids. So yeah, we're really excited about that, to get that started. It's been a bit of a long and stressful period through planning, but we're just about there now. So yeah, that's the next 12, 18 months we're going to be building that.
Well, I certainly can't wait to see a lot more of this stuff from you guys. Where's the best place for people to get in touch if people want to reach out and connect? What's the best place?
Well, we're on Instagram, Facebook, and so both of those are at Alex Allen Properties. You can find us in both places, and then we have the website too at alexallenproperties.co.uk.
Amazing. Well, thank you again so much for coming on, guys. To all our listeners, you can find out a bit more about Becky and Alex in the roadmap and their case study. Go and have a read of it. Thank you so much, guys, for coming on and sharing your story. It's been an absolute pleasure and great to chat to people who are investing in HMOs, because I absolutely love it. Thank you again to all of our listeners for tuning in today. Thank you so much for being here and supporting the podcast. And if you could just spare 30 seconds to leave a very quick review, we would massively appreciate it. And don't forget that JP and I, and hopefully I can drag Becky and Alex over to the HMO community as well in Facebook. We're there. We're on hand to answer more of your questions, offer more guidance and support, anything that you need to help you grow your HMO portfolio or business. That's it from me today. Thank you so much again, guys. It's an absolute pleasure to have you here.
Thank you. Yeah,
nice to speak.
And we will see you in the next episode.